Did you ever see something that made you say, how did they do that? Did you ever see something that made you say, how did they do that? A fun welcome to our podcast with Randy Chris, where we talk to those who did it. Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it.
Did you ever see something that made you say, how did they do that? I'm your host, Randy Chris, and this is my podcast where we talk to those people who did it. I'm completely excited today to have a friend who is just a phenomenal person, who's a developer who has achieved such success at a young age. It's phenomenal, and people his age are saying, how'd he do that? Well, Joe Bonora is going to tell us how he did that. Say hello, Joe.
Thanks, Randy. I appreciate that. I don't feel as young as I used to be because I'm getting older. So I don't know how many more years I can claim the young tag. But but thank you for the introduction, and thank you for having me on.
Well, I think the accomplishments you made. What are you, like 42 or something?
42, yeah.
42. Well, what you've done by 42 is still young. Trust me, because I'm much older, and I thought I did good at 42. But you're just a superstar, and everybody loves you, and you're such a good guy. And so I just wanted to kind of explore how you got to where you're at today. The first thing is you're a local guy here in Lee County, Cape Coral, and you've done some things and moved around, and I knew you from the financial business when you were 20 years ago, which I guess is what started your career. And maybe you could kind of give us a little bit of a bio to say, how did you go from, let's say, high school to where you're at now? Because it's amazing.
Yeah, well, so going back to high school, I would never consider myself somebody who is terribly into school. I don't think I was probably the best student. I was like ADD before they were really diagnosing ADD, and
we all were. Trust me.
Yeah, right?
My mother beat it out of me.
That must be like a trend in the real estate business, right? Everybody, or something that's common to all of us. But I think early on I really knew what I wanted to do, and I always had a thing for an interest in finance. My brother worked on Wall Street, and I always had this like vision or idea that I would do something similar. And and to me, getting out of high school, I wanted to fast track it. So I didn't necessarily want to go to college and take that time. So I started really my career pretty early. I got a job at a bank, when I was 19, and South Trust Bank doing, opening accounts and home equity lines. And then, I just got interested and got introduced to the mortgage business back then. Got my mortgage license, worked for a company for a few months, learned the business, and then I started my company when I was just before I was 21. My brother and I set up our mortgage shop, and so that was the beginning of my entrepreneurial career, and that's pretty much been it since.
Well, most entrepreneurs have the spirit in them when they're very young. The shoveling, like I did, cleaning out horse stalls for $1 a bucket of, a wheelbarrow of manure, and then we'd take it down and try to sell it to somebody for their garden, stuff like that. I know that feeling, and I'm sure you do too. You can't be constrained by, like the bank. I guarantee you, knowing just what you said now, that bank constrains you so much you couldn't stand to get away from there. Is that probably a true statement?
Definitely. I think one thing you find common across people that are self-employed or entrepreneurial is that, there's this, you like to kind of reap the benefits of what you sow, and you like to see the fruits of labor, right? And so you work hard and you get rewarded for it, and you control your own destiny. And working for a bank, and nothing against bankers or working at banks. I mean, it's a great profession. For me, it was limiting because it was a very 9 to 5, or back then I think it was like 9 to 4, right? And it was at 4 o'clock, everybody's gone, and even if you had stuff to do, you couldn't stay. You had to get out of the bank. And so I think I learned pretty quickly that I think as entrepreneurs, many people are unemployable. That's right.
Well,
Probably how I describe
at
myself.
this at this point, you're ruined as an employee.
Yeah.
I mean, same as me, but we don't want to be employees. But what I was meaning is like the bank, it's got to be no innovative thinking, almost no thinking for yourself. And you are such an innovative guy, and you've done such forward thinking projects, and the evidence is, out there standing on the street. And I just believe that, this is innate. You can't hardly teach what you have. You just have to feel it and grow it and work it. I'm sure there were people in your life that said, "Oh, Joe, you can't do that. You'll never get that done." Did that happen to you? Most entrepreneurs face that early.
Yeah, I think so. For me, I'm the youngest of three, right? Two older brothers. I'm 6 years younger than the middle one, and 7 and 8 years younger than the oldest one. And to a large degree, I think growing up, I was kind of on my own, right? They went away to college. I lost my father when I was young. I really got to raise I had a lot of time, raising myself. And so, you kind of get that, you learn that survival instinct and, and how to be independent. And a lot of that, and through my high school years and just out of high school, I plenty of times told, you can't do that. Or you're not going to make it. You're not going to do anything. Family members told me that. And, look, I got into, I was mischievous when I was growing up and, and
everybody,
and I think a lot of that has to do with just, kind of thinking differently, right? And kind of going and doing your own thing. And so I was fortunately able to channel that into something positive. Sometimes that free thinking gets people in trouble, and I was able to focus that energy on what work became for me the place where I found comfort, right? Just working hard. And that's something I think in our family, we're all hard workers. The work ethic is definitely in us. So, but yeah, plenty of time.
I mean, that's important. I'm a third child also, and I believe birth order has a place in your personality. It definitely, the first one's all independent and they make the baby book and do everything for them. And the second one, oh yes. And then the third one, they go say, play in the traffic,
That's exactly right. The third one is do whatever you want to do. The first one,
exactly.
So by the time it was
we raised two. We're not worried about that third one. He'll be just fine.
That's right. That was it.
I've always thought about that. But so you have, I guess your niche now is upscale development of apartments and office space. And I don't know how many projects. I know of 5 or 6 at least that I know you've now completed, and you're only 42. I think that was my point opening up. Nobody does that. You've built consensus. You've put all these people together. I mean, when they say it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to build a 350 or 400 apartments with different options. I know one of yours, you're building another out parcel, a different out parcel on the other side. The project itself, City Walk in Fort Myers, is magnificent and beautiful.
Thank you.
And you've still got things to do. How do you bring those people together to get that banker to believe in you, to get the city to believe in you, to get all the different facets, and then run the architects and make them make what you want, not what they want, and then the engineers and it's just endless. And this is the pressure that somebody like you has to endure every day. And it's numbing sometimes, but you have such a good spirit. You are such a cooperative guy. How did you get to be able to keep these people together, keep happy, don't get upset, make it beautiful, and get your way? How were you able to do all those kind of things?
It's a good question. Development is a lot of herding cats, right? You got 50 different parties involved. You got design team, contractors, lenders, investors. I mean, there's so many people involved in the process. So you got to be organized. You got to manage it. I've got a great team here, at our company. We got good people that are working on this stuff and helping out. And I think, one thing that, given kind of my upbringing and how I, raised problem solving is a big part of it, because
Yes.
development is just a daily series of fires that need to be put out, and you cannot panic. You can't get worked up. You can't get mad. You can't get sad. You have to just level head. Things pop up.
Push through.
You just figure out a solution. It's always something, and nothing is insurmountable, and you just have to figure out, ways to get around it. And I think staying level headed and even keeled keeps everybody else feeling the same way, right? So if you're not worked up, everybody else stays calm. And so, I think that steady hand is what helps out keeping these things moving through the process and moving forward. And that gives the confidence to the lenders, the bankers, the investors that, you're competent, but you have the temperament necessary to manage this. It's a big project. A lot of things are going to go wrong. It always happens, and you got to be able to navigate it. And I think I've been able to over time, and you get, track record helps, right? The more you do, the more background you have, the more comfortable people get. And I will say that development is a business that experience is critical, right? The more you do, the better you get. And, you just learn on every project, and you never stop learning. And so you get better every time. And, again, I think that being able to get people to have confidence in what you're doing, and then also having the other side, the kind of creative side, right? A vision that you can then clearly articulate to people, right? You have to be able to look at a site and explain to people what's going to be there. And a lot of people don't have the ability to visualize, and see it. And so you have to have the ability to kind of paint that picture with words and describe it, and then show them what it's going to look like. And to your point about the architects and, getting them to do what you want, it takes a lot of work, not because they don't want to listen. I think it's, my experience with architects have been, the really creative ones are great at coming up with creative things that cost a lot to build. And then the ones that aren't as creative can do great plans that are economical, but don't look great. So you got to kind of figure out, which path you want to go. You want to have the creative one that you then have to spend a lot of time getting value engineering, or do you want to have the one that's a little less creative that you can then bring your creative touch to it and do all the creative while they do the plans? I tend to do the latter, right? I've worked with architects that are really talented, do good documents, they know code, they know how to do plans. Not to say that they're not creative, they are, but, I think, they are more probably on the analytics side or more detail. And that's, for me, I enjoy the creative side, the coming up with the aesthetic and the function and all that. And so you really have to spend time in the details. And I think that's helpful.
One thing I've noticed about you is that you're the boss, but you're a team player. And sometimes that's hard to do. As we go through life and we see these heavy-handed CEOs that it's going to be this way or whatever, the type I'm talking about. And you are so amiable. And I know these problems are sometimes you go and you just shut your eyes and you say, how am I going to get past this one? But somehow you adapt, you overcome, you stay focused, I guess. Maybe you can tell me how you do that.
Well, to your first point, I think reminding yourself to remain humble, right? I think is kind of key to not getting the ego to a point where you just don't listen to input. If you think you know everything, you're never going to learn anything, right? And so you just got to acknowledge that you don't. And, I think as you get older, as I've gotten older, and every day you kind of see this, that, your view of things is not always the right view. And so you have to be willing to accept the fact that you're wrong, or you might not, yours might not be the best idea. And if you can open yourself up to that, you're going to end up with a better everything, better product, better project. You're going to be more successful because, you got to be able to take all this input, all these ideas and all that. And there's a lot of great ones. You can't be closed-minded to it, and I think that's makes me a better leader. And you empower and enable your people to do what they do, right? And to learn, but also to give you their input, especially with apartments, right? I can tell you that somebody who's 25, 26 years old would probably give me better input on what they want in an apartment than me, who doesn't live in an apartment, can tell me, right? They live there. They're going to tell you, hey man, nobody wants to have that. They don't want that amenity. That's not good. So, if you're not listening to that, I mean, you're not gonna put out the best product. So I don't think all that comes into again, if problems come up, man, you just open it up and you get input and throw ideas out on the table, and that's how we get.
So let's talk about your very first project. You were what, 28? Doing the first one, something like that?
Well, it would have been like probably early 30s. I was like 31.
Okay, so you're 32, and they're looking at this bright kid, and they say, oh, how's he going to build these 200, 300 apartments? How big was your first one?
325.
325. That's a big project.
Yeah, I didn't.
And they come and they say, young kid, I don't know if they're going to get it done, but I think my point is you almost have to beg some people to work with you. It seems like, but now you're ultra successful. You got to fight them off because they all want to work with you. Is that kind of a true statement?
I mean, I would say we're fighting them off. I mean, it's always a challenge. I think in the beginning, the challenge was, given my background in finance and not development, the common objection we get would be, you're finance guys, what do you know about development? And my response to that, number one, was, if you want to be successful in development, you better know the finance side of it. You need to make sure that your numbers are right, the economics are good, you know how to structure financing. So I thought that gave us an advantage as opposed to being a negative. And I said, the other thing was, I'm not a contractor. I'm not building this thing. I'm not an architect. I'm not designing it. I'm hiring the people. So as long as I know how to manage a good team of talented people, I don't know how we'll be able to execute on it, right? Because I think if you're organized and you're competent and you hire the right people and you work with them, you can get it done, right? I think that was the biggest thing. So, we had to get past that objection, but I think once we got that first one done, it's definitely gotten easier every project to raise money and to get people on board. And I think now it's more about picking the right partners, right, and investors, as opposed to just taking whoever will put money in. Now it's about like, are you aligned? Is this an investor that or a partner you want to be in a deal with, right? You don't want to be in these. Mm-hmm. These are 4 or 5 year, projects. These are long-term deals and relationships. So you definitely don't want to get into a deal where you're not aligned with your partners on it, because you're just setting yourself up for problems down the road. So I think that now is the case. So it's it's being particular on who you work with, right? And maybe it's you do less deals because you want to have the right partners and you want to execute. And that's really our kind of strategy, and our plan has been to just, we're not trying to do 5,000 units a year. We're trying to do less, but good, really nice projects with people that we want.
Well, your projects that I've seen are beautiful, but didn't you tell me you're building something aligned with the city in Sarasota? That's a major project.
Bradenton,
the city's on board with.
Yeah, in Bradenton, it's a neat deal. This is I think this is kind of more of a philosophical way of doing business, right? Where I feel like we had a site that we had under contract, and they have the Art Center, Manatee. They've been an institution there for almost 80 years. They're right downtown. They've had this location. They do art classes. They have exhibits there. They've just been in the community, and they had plans.
It's a major asset of the community, right?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yep. And they had plans to build a new art center on one of the parcels that we were acquiring. And so, they had spent time and put together this plan, but they had no rights to build it. And our plan for our project was building where they were going to go. And so we met with them. And I saw that art center is not like an impediment, but more an asset for the project. And so we made the decision to redesign our project to allow them to build their art center. And then we design our project around what they're doing so that now their new beautiful facility is kind of like the focal point, and we're just complementing that. And I think, for us, we're going to create this beautiful kind of art-inspired and themed project that centers around this new $15 million, great facility they're building with an art walk and sculptures, and it connects downtown and the river walk to our project. And
it's got to help you.
And, that I think, they appreciated the fact that we did that. We could have just said, forget it, we're building ours. Because, it probably took us an extra 6 months to redesign the project to make it happen for them. But I think this has been in my mind, through my career is like, you get long-term thinking, right? That, you're doing this because it's the right thing to do to work with them. And then down the road, what ends up happening is you've got the city support, you got community support, and you end up with a project that everybody buys into. That's going to be great. And I think that was the ultimate goal. That's, we'll start that one next year, and it's going to be a really neat project.
When you work with the city and redesign it and do that, does letting them build their thing, even though it's an enhancement to your project in the long run, does it impact your financial goals of your project prior to getting involved with the city? Are you having to be almost a philanthropist for them?
I don't know that I would go this far to say that, it's philanthropy as much as we probably could have built a project that would have cost us less to build and we could have been up and running faster had we just not gone that route.
So that's an impact.
Oh yeah, no, there's an economic impact. So I think it probably cost us more to build and took us longer. But I think the value that we'll create as a result of working with them and what the finished product will be will offset that. So, you try to get to that win-win, and I think that's what it'll be, right? So maybe it costs us a little time and money up front, but I think we'll have a better, more valuable project at the end, and they got what they wanted, and we'll get what we want, and the community will get what they want. And so it took a little time and probably some money up front, but the investment's worth it. I mean, the finished product's going to be great, and I think we'll get the value and then some back. And probably more importantly, because, it's not always about economics, right? I mean,
exactly.
You got to get returns, but you also have to do something that, personally makes you feel good about it, right? The work you're doing.
But when you start adding up the pluses and minuses and you got to talk to the banker, it is about the money. And so when it impacts you, you have to adapt. But I think your civic pride in a project like this and your willingness to help the city and help the community in the long run, and you got a lot of years left, will benefit you and your project. And they should probably, give you the Developer of the Year award up there in Bradenton or something.
Look, I mean,
maybe we'll nominate you.
I think the best for me, kind of outcome of these things is never recognition of it, and more being a part of something that's bigger and better, right? And I think that, and look, my finance background helps with this because I can actually go in and quantify the impact, both on, so like it'll cost us this more up front, but I can tell you that we're going to get better rents, higher rents, we're going to perform better. And so you can show that and demonstrate that to the banks and the investors and prove it out. And, look, I mean, positive social impact and economic returns, they don't have to be mutually exclusive, right? I mean, you can get both.
Correct.
Right. So I think you can do something that is a positive to the community, but also makes you more money. I mean,
well, I think that just demonstrates why you're successful, because even in Fort Myers and Lee County and Cape Coral and those areas you've developed in, you've made every effort to satisfy the community and the city leaders to have a product that everybody can be proud of. And I certainly think you've done that. And, everybody doesn't have the temperament to put up with people trying to tell them what to do. And I think your smooth style benefits you. And how did you get here at 42? Cooperation, quality, a team approach, those kind of things. Do you think that's valid?
Yeah, no, it's principles, right? It's the principles you live by, right? And I think, it's fundamentally, do good things happen, right? The kind of karma, right? If you want to call it some kind of like spiritual belief, it's, you do good things come back. And I think, look, I mean, it's pretty basic that just listen to people, right? Like, why do you want to get into a contentious issue by trying to develop something going against everybody, right? I mean, it just makes your life miserable, right? You're fighting all the time, and all you had to do is just listen and do a couple things to make people happy. And they're usually not major things, right? It's just little things,
right?
But you got to be willing to listen and not come in thinking that you know everything. I mean, that if you go into an area or a project and just think that you know what's best for everybody and you don't listen to them, you're just, it's a selfish approach, and it's not going to yield the best product. And ultimately, I think when you listen to the community and you spend time understanding what everybody wants, that's how you manage risk, because you're going to build something that will be successful because you took the time to understand what people are looking for. Now, look, I mean, it's like politics, right? You can't make everybody happy. There's always you can do something and somebody's not going to like the traffic, right? Or something. But ultimately, I think people at least will understand that that you're not coming in just doing whatever you want to do. You're spending the time to get their concerns and listen to them and see what you can do to address it. And I think that's been the approach, and that will always be. I think in my mind, that's just the way to do business.
So no matter what size development you're building, it magnifies as you get larger. There's always politics. You can't get away from it because you need the government to approve it and the city leaders to agree with it. And sometimes you need development assistance in money from the county or the state, because some of these projects are a large improvement, and the cities make more money from the taxation from a vacant lot. And you have opposition to people saying they're giving developers money when in fact you're enhancing the community, making an asset that people can use, and increasing, many times your projects increase the tax base dramatically for them.
Yeah, I think opposition to things like some of these incentives is more just a lack of knowledge and education on what the actual economics look like, right? So I think a lot of people just see on the surface that you're getting a tax rebate or an impact fee waiver, and they go, that's just a handout. But it's when you dig down into it, I think if they're educated, know more about what the outcome is. I mean, when we look at it, we ask for what we need to make a project work economically. And if you don't get it, you don't do the project, and that's fine. You just go find another site. But that area, the city, or that community within the city, they are the one that lose out, right? Because $100 million investment in a part of the city, there's so much that comes from that, right? So on the economic side, I mean, you have all the spending, you get the tax base increase, you get improvement around the area, you bring in more amenities, more restaurants, more things like that. That all results from these
economic benefit of the construction and the workers during the build. You'd said something about, your latest projects, like a 2-year build. You'll have hundreds of people on that project in the next 2 years making money, paying taxes, eating lunch near the site, things like that. I just never did understand everybody who, do not want projects especially in a blighted area where it doesn't really impact them and they live a mile away, but they want to come to city council meetings and complain about what you're doing with really, like you say, absolutely no knowledge really of the whole process.
Well, look, I mean, again, I think people that come there to, maybe voice opposition to, incentives and all that, I think they are looking at it and they just don't have a good understanding of it. So in their mind, they're probably right in thinking that, why are they giving this money away? And it just takes the sitting down and going through with them and explaining it. And most times that does a trick. I mean, people, when they get a better understanding of it, I mean, I've had city officials that didn't understand certain programs, and once you explain it, they go, well, if I knew that, I wouldn't be in opposition to, I just know I've never really understood the whole thing. And then, like, again, there's just sometimes people just don't want change, right? I mean, there's just, residents that just doesn't matter what you do. If it's different than what it is, they just don't want it. And that's, there's nothing you can do about that. And that's okay. I mean, not everybody has to agree with you. Like I said, I mean, like.
So when you're developing something, the first step is to get the zoning, which that's the city saying you're allowed to build it there. And I've been to, I don't know, 40 zoning meetings in my life, and everybody, traffic, noise. That's all they ever have to say about opposition, traffic and noise. I mean, if you build something and more people come there, I guess you're going to have more traffic and more noise, but these people came to one of my zoning hearings, 2 people in opposition, and I'd owned the land 15 years before their house was built across the street. You know, you start saying, hey, now there's a fairness here too.
Well,
What do you do about zoning and getting that preliminary stuff to get that vision to them so that they understand and approve it to begin with?
well, again, I think it goes back to spending the time to talk to the people that will be impacted by the project that you're going to do, and understanding what their issues are, like if it's traffic or if it's noise, and then you try to figure out the best way to mitigate it or manage it, right? So if it's traffic, all right, well, let's figure out where the entrance and exit is, right? Where we put in the garage, where's traffic going to, right? And then where are they going to park? And then if it's noise, right? Like it's okay. Well, where's the noise going to come from, right? It's not going to come from the units. It's probably going to come from the amenity area, or it's going to come from an area of congregation. So where do you design that so that it's not going to impact those people? And there's a lot of things you can do to address it. And I think probably as important, or maybe more important, is that if they know that you're doing these things to address it, then they know that you're listening.
You're not just dismissing them and say, it's my property, I can do what I want,
right.
which I've seen happen many times.
Well, and I think that's, in my mind, in my view, like that's developers, that in people's minds, that's what they think of developers. They come in, they build something, they don't care, they make their money and they move on. And look, that happens. Our projects are all in Southwest Florida, West Coast of Florida, Tampa down to Naples, right? These are like backyard, right? So, and that's all we're doing, and that's what we'll continue doing. And so, my view is that we're going to be here a long time, and you can't just go in there and do what you want and leave. A, it's not the way to do business, and B, it's not going to help you be successful long term. I think if people just know that you're willing to listen, and you're making an effort to address their concerns, they will be a lot more open to your project. And you might not make all of them happen, you might not satisfy all of them, but I think the fact that you're going that extra step goes a long way, because the last thing people want is somebody to just basically, like you said, dismiss them and not even listen, right? Because then it's just no respect. You don't care. And and to me, that's, again, go back to kind of your philosophy on how you do stuff, right? Do you want to be the person that doesn't? Maybe you don't care. I do. So I just take the time to listen to people.
Right. And I do too.
Yeah. Some people don't.
We live here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and again, I think if you can get everybody bought into your project, it'll be a better project, and the community will embrace it. It'll be more successful. I just think it's just, if you look at the really successful developers over time, at least the ones that I have respect for, that's a common theme. They do spend the time to understand the community and what people want, and they're more involved and invested in the community than just kind of coming in, popping something up, selling it, and moving on.
So you're young. Trust me, you're young. But you're 20 years into the business, basically, with your finance background and into actually doing projects. What would you tell a young person who understands that there's a career to be had, but you obviously just, somebody, unless they're like, I saw that George Perez's kid's now president of their multi-billion-dollar company, and that's all well and good. If I had a kid in that company, I'd make him president of mine too. But a guy who was just a common, everyday guy, but you have dreams. How do you get there? What advice would you give a young person who really was an okay person? They weren't perfect. None of us are, but they had a dream to, in 20 years, have a nice, solid company like you have with the accomplishments that you've done. How would you tell somebody to even get started?
It's funny because I think, real estate development is not a career that people think about. Maybe more so now than before, right? Like I didn't think about being a real estate developer when I started out. Finance was my background, and I think now, development maybe is a bit more mainstream. They have majors in college now that are real estate development, and they have master programs for it. But I think if this is what you want to do, I think if you can align yourself early on with a company or a developer or a person that will take the time to show you, like, like a mentor or somebody that can like take you under their wing and expose you to as much of the business as possible. Because what I would say is what I did when I started doing development was everything, right? With no faking it of like acting like I knew what the architect was talking about. I would just say, all right, what is that line? What is this acronym? What is this squiggly thing here? I don't know what that means. I'd stop the meeting, but like, you got to explain that to me because I don't know what you're talking about. I do that still. I mean,
Well, I mean, don't we all? We should.
I mean, we had a meeting yesterday with a contractor talking about like, post tensions. And I'm like, what are these cables? What do they do? Like, so you're always, I think you just have to be, willing to just, be open to the fact that you don't know and you want to learn and just try to learn as much as you can and be involved in all aspects of it. I do think, if you go to work for a large company, like a big firm, maybe like a Related and bigger, you might get siloed there and you are in finance and that's it. Right? Or you're in zoning and that's it. And I think if you limit yourself, you're kind of limiting what the potential could be. So I would say if somebody wants to get into this business and ultimately become a developer, expose yourself to all aspects, the finance side, the construction side, the design side, everything, all parts of it. And when the construction's going on, be out there on the site, ask questions. What is that? What does that mean? Talk to the MEP engineer, talk to the architect, like just learn as much as you can about all aspects. You're not going to be, proficient in everything. You're not going to be an expert, but just having a good base knowledge of pretty much all parts of it.
A working knowledge, as they say.
Well, that's how you work through issues. When the fires come up, then you have at least a good enough understanding that you know how to deal with the issue, right? Because you don't know how to fix a problem if you don't even know what they're talking about, right? So if something comes up in construction, I know enough to know who to either go to or how to fix the problem, right? So if I don't know how to fix it myself, I do know to call this sub or call this person, and that's how you work. And same thing with the finance side or any part of it. So learn as much as possible.
So you have children, right?
I do too. Mm-hmm.
Would you encourage them to follow in your footsteps and join your company when they're at the age to do that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I would love it. I mean, I have a daughter and a son. I think my daughter is showing signs of creativity. She'd probably be more the architect, right? She'd be the person designing these things. Extremely creative. My son is probably going to be like the structural engineer. He's not going to talk to anybody, but he'll design something that'll never fall down. And I mean, with kids, I don't think I'd ever like force anything on them. It's interesting. I hear
can't do it anyway. Trust me.
Well, you hear about like these, like a Perez, right? Like, at the dinner table, they're talking about work, and I'm kind of the opposite. Like my kids I don't think they know what I do. I think they think I'm a builder or something, but they don't really get it.
Right.
I'm now just starting to show them like the projects, and they get kind of interested in it. They're getting a little bit older. And I think if they have an interest, it's a great business. It's a great industry, and I would love it if they got involved in it. I think I'm of the belief that you got to work to earn, right? And they won't be given anything, and they haven't been getting. They have to develop the work ethic that is required to be successful, and so they're going to struggle to get whatever they get because that's A, how they're going to appreciate it, and B, how they'll be successful. So they're going to have to do it on their own. I mean, they're not getting handed anything. They won't step into any kind of position. If they work for me, it's going to be they're going to start at the bottom and they're going to do everything, and they'll be on par with everybody else. And
well, and as it should be, or else you're then privileged and you get an attitude of entitlement, and then you don't think the job through because you're allowed to do it because it's you. And that's what you have to guard against with them. Well, listen, I've taken enough of your time today, Joe. I can't tell you how honored I am to be able to spend this time with you on this podcast. You've been just so transparent, and I hope your words are helpful to others that watch this, because you're a really talented guy. You've done magnificent things. You're open to the community. I know the things you do, and I just am pleased to call you my friend. I'll just say that up front.
I appreciate everything you just said, and I'm humbled by it. I think I do. I respect you and appreciate all those words, and hopefully I live up to them. Right? I mean, it's you said a lot of nice things, and hopefully I can keep carrying that out. So.
Well, I think you will. I think you got it down to a science at this point, as they say. But just thanks again, and I'm sure I'll see you when I see you. But I'm in awe of what you've done at your age.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Important. Thank you so much. All right. Well, that's our latest edition of How Did They Do That? And our guest, Joe Bonora, has been so gracious to speak with us today. And when you watch this podcast, if you like it, give us a review. Don't give us a bad review. I don't think you can from this one. So we appreciate everything that you guys do for us by giving us likes and reviews. It helps get these circulated, and we are just so pleased. So for this edition of How Did They Do That? It's Randy Chris signing off.
Tell us how you did it. Tell us how